After the chaotic events of Hawaii, we collectively agreed on one thing. No more Greg, no more laminated schedules, no more coupon clipping, and definitely no more rules about how long we could have fun. For our next trip, we set our sights on New Orleans and decided to leave Greg entirely out of the loop. It was foolproof, until it wasn't. We should have known Greg would catch on. His silence in the group chat was unsettling. Normally, he'd bombard us with helpful suggestions like a walking trip advisor. Instead, nothing. Radio silence. "This is too easy," Mike said, sipping a beer as we finalized plans. "He's probably sulking," Dave replied. But deep down, we all knew Greg wasn't the type to let go without a fight. New Orleans greeted us with jazz music, vibrant streets, and the sweet scent of beignets in the air. Without Greg's nagging, we let loose immediately. Our first stop was Bourbon Street, where we sampled hand grenades, hurricanes, and every deep-fried delicacy we could find. As the night went on, we started joking about what Greg would say if he were here. "Is that cocktail cost-effective?" Dave mocked, waving his drink. "Do we really need extra powdered sugar?" Mike added, shaking a beignet for emphasis. We laughed until our sides hurt, and that's when it happened. Standing at the end of the street, clipboard in hand, wearing a garish Mardi Gras vest and a look of smug satisfaction, was Greg. "Miss me?" he called. "How the hell?" I started. "Oh, it wasn't hard," Greg said, strolling up like he owned the place. Dave accidentally left his laptop open at poker night. Also, nice fake group chat. Pro tip: if you're going to exclude someone, don't use my email for the hotel reservation. Dave turned beet red. "And the vest?" Mike asked, pointing. "Local color," Greg said proudly. "When in Rome, or in this case New Orleans, blend in with the natives. Now shall we get to the itinerary?" We groaned in unison as Greg whipped out his laminated schedule. The next morning, Greg insisted we meet for breakfast at a cafe he deemed cost-efficient. "It's got great Yelp reviews," he said, guiding us to a small diner where the menu looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. We complied, but maliciously, of course. "I'll have the $6 omelet," I said, then added, "with extra bacon, cheese, and a side of crab cakes." "Make mine the same, but sub in lobster tails," Dave said, grinning. Mike upped the ante. "I'll take the pancakes with gold leaf flakes and a mimosa. How much is the upcharge?" Greg's face turned a delightful shade of crimson as the server scribbled furiously. Greg's itinerary included a walking tour of historical New Orleans. "It's free if we don't tip the guide," he whispered conspiratorially. We played along until we reached a famous haunted house. "We have to go in," Dave said. "Not on the schedule," Greg replied, clutching his clipboard. But the tour guide overheard. "Actually, this house is part of the route," he said, clearly amused. We smirked as Greg begrudgingly paid the admission fee. Inside, we all screamed dramatically at the fake ghosts, except for Greg, who shrieked so loudly at a mannequin that even the guide broke character. That night, Greg announced he'd found a jazz club with no cover charge. "A great place to wind down," he said. But the club turned out to be standing room only, with overpriced drinks and a singer whose voice could peel paint. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Mike muttered, "but let's ditch Greg." We slipped out under the guise of getting some air and headed straight to a lively rooftop bar with live music, great cocktails, and 0 clipboards. The morning of our last day in New Orleans, as we were dragging ourselves out of bed after another night of dodging Greg's meticulously planned activities, we noticed something strange. Greg was missing. Not a trace, not a clipboard, just gone. At first, we figured he was off somewhere doing Greg things, maybe investigating the most cost-efficient way to catch breakfast. But by noon, when we met up to begrudgingly comply with yet another one of his itinerary surprises, we saw him, and he wasn't alone. Standing beside Greg was a woman who looked, quite frankly, too much like him. She wore a neon green fanny pack and an I Love NOLA t-shirt, straight from a tourist shop we had definitely avoided. Her hair was perfectly combed into an absurdly tight bun, and she held a clipboard. The resemblance was uncanny. "This is Karen," Greg introduced, his voice uncharacteristically warm. "Nice to meet you," Karen said, flashing us a smile that screamed scheduling conflict. "I've been helping Greg plan his itinerary for the past few days. He's been telling me all about your unique approach to travel." We stood there, processing this new development, as Greg beamed. It was hard to miss the gleam in his eye. "I've been showing Karen the ropes," Greg said proudly. "She's really into detailed plans. She even made a spreadsheet to track our food costs here in the French Quarter. Isn't that great?" Mike's jaw dropped. "Wait, you found someone who's more like you?" "I thought you'd be proud," Greg said, his smug grin now matched by Karen's equally determined one. "Right," Dave muttered. "This just went from a vacation to a support group for compulsive planners." The two of them immediately launched into a discussion about the best deals on gumbo and the top 5 most affordable places to take a walking tour, ignoring us entirely. It was as if we were standing in the midst of some bizarre Greg version 2.0, a female counterpart who seemed equally obsessed with efficiency. We exchanged horrified glances. This was too much. Later that evening, as we reluctantly followed their schedule through another authentic New Orleans experience, because of course we couldn't break away for just one night, Greg and Karen were inseparable. They compared laminated maps, debated which jazz bar offered the best value for the money, and even traded tips on how to maximize frequent flyer miles. "Do you think they're—" I asked cautiously. "Do you think they're not?" Mike shot back. As we sipped our overpriced cocktails at yet another budget-friendly venue, we realized we had lost him for good. Not only had Greg infiltrated New Orleans with his itinerary, but he'd also found his match, a woman just as committed to the art of maximizing every second of every trip, down to the last penny. Greg, now thoroughly content with his newfound travel partner, raised his glass. "To Karen," he said, "the best co-planner a guy could ask for." We raised our glasses reluctantly, wondering if Greg's next trip would involve a whole new level of meticulous control, and if Karen would be there to make sure the rules were even more rigidly enforced. One thing was certain: Greg was never ever going to stop, and now he had a partner in crime.